the extent to which in the focusing world we don't often bring our focusing to our assumptions about things. It's like because we
Mm,
also live within a culture, I'm a part of this whole culture. I come to my focusing with particular assumptions about the world, about myself, of what should be. And I think sometimes well, I know I witnessed this, and I'm sure I do it myself. We focus within the assumptions we have rather than broadening out and allowing ourselves to focus on the assumptions themselves.
yes, yes, yes.
And
Yeah.
it's not a good example, but one little example I have of that is in my focusing partnership. I was talking about a feeling I had about uh, not being able to accept dying. And there was some
Mhm.
just could not accept this and was
Mhm. Yes.
was felt resistance and didn't want it to happen to me. Horrible it happened
Mhm.
to everybody else, but God forbid it should happen to me. And
Yeah,
just
yeah.
wants to accept that as reality. And I felt that I had to find some way to make that okay, that I had
Mm.
to find some way to accept the inevitable.
Mm. Mhm.
Sing partner reflected it back pretty much word for word what I had been saying, but with a slightly more neutral tone.
Mm.
And
Mm.
suddenly I got this feeling, hold on a second, why do I have to accept this?
Right,
And I
right.
started to feel all of this energy of I can't accept this, and I'm not
Yes,
going to accept this.
yes,
My assumptions about what had to happen, and I was just going to focus within the narrowness of what had to happen.
yes.
Suddenly it burst out and became a much bigger thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think often with our social and political feelings, that we're still within the narrowness. And if we could use focusing to look at how have we already framed this?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a larger frame for this that would allow us to question the whole way we're approaching it? How have we already framed this?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a larger frame for this that would allow us to question the whole way we're approaching it?
Mm. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. It's a wonderful example. And I think that's why we have to talk to and focus with people who have different frames. And then where people are so resistant to doing that in the social political realm. I mean, conservatives don't want to focus with progressives or, uh, but, and people will often say to me, well, why do you want to talk to them? And, you know, if you can't change their minds, then why bother?
That's the whole
And
point.
right, and 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 uh, and I have trouble communicating. I need that because that's the only way um, I can see my own assumptions is by um, talking to people who don't have those assumptions, that maybe have opposite assumptions, and then I can see my own. Otherwise, I'm within the frame. I'm within the
Yeah,
framework that my culture gives me.
yeah, that certainly is one way to bring oneself face to face with that kind of difference. That can be so helpful. Um, there's two things it reminds me of. One is there's a way of reflecting back that helps me. It can kind of deconstruct assumptions that I didn't even know were assumptions. Like,
Mm.
say, well, myself myself is built upon that belief. And if it's reflected back to me, so there's something called yourself.
Yes.
It's like, hold on a second, I was taking that for granted, that part of it.
Yes.
But another example it reminds me of is some years ago when we had this big referendum in the UK on Brexit, and it divided the country almost.
Yes.
And people like myself who were opposed to Brexit wanted to stay in the European Union, and that was mostly the progressive side. We were just in shock. And it was like people just, it was like being in a dream world the next day, walking into town, and just the whole town looked different because we lived in a different world suddenly. And it was like, idiots, those idiots, what have they done to us?
Right.
And that was my response for a while. And then I started to get sick of that. And I started to say, hold on a second. What if no one is an idiot? What if there's no such thing as an idiot? And it was out of that I worked with some people and put together the World Day of Listening. And the whole point of listen without trying to change anyone's mind. Listening isn't the same as agreeing with them, but listening also isn't a sneaky way of trying to change them. Listening is so that they can better understand themselves. And the side effect of that is you generally become closer to them.
Wow. Yeah. I'm so touched by that. And I loved your World Day of Listening. We did a little version of that at a psychoanalytic conference when you had that day. And I made a little group at this conference, and we all listened to each other. And that idea of trying out the assumption that there are no idiots, that each person, each system, each group has something that it's trying to carry forward that's of value, that they're and that is very central to focusing. That the ideas, I was just rereading the interview with Jean about experiential therapy and client-centered therapy, and his saying that even the ugliest for him theories have something to teach him if he can go beyond the literal and find what it's trying to get at. And just that very simple thing that Jean says about what would you want that word to mean is so helpful. And in anything, in any kind of conversation, to just ask yourself that, or ask the other person, what do you want that word to mean? Especially with political terms that are so taken for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so important. That always becomes a much richer experiential conversation as soon as you ask to open up something that is presented as a closed concept.
Yeah. Dan Schechter brought that to the helpers group, and it was wonderful. And I had never seen it, just the simplicity of asking a group that makes you able to talk about anything.
Yeah, I'm imagining situations immediately where I find that difficult.
Like what?
So I'm thinking like right wing extremists, neo-Nazi groups would find it difficult to I guess I would need to trust that they would, the other person who held such an opposite view from me, that they would have some intention to engage or something. I think it would be difficult to engage in that kind of a dialogue with someone who's not ready for or interested in dialogue with me.
Well, I think that, of course, some people won't want to dialogue with you because from their vantage point, you're bad and you're a danger, right? And you're an idiot. But focusing can't solve that problem.
In my best moments, I'm able to really set aside my own perspective and enter with curiosity into another person's perspective and to hear it unfold, and that both of us become interested in their point of view. And I value that. I like that experience when I can do that. I guess I'm just thinking of the times that something else has to happen first before we're in that face-to-face kind of scenario. And it reminds me of just last night. There's a group of young people in the neighborhood where I live who are they like to cause trouble. They go around in a gang of about 6 or 7. They're probably 14, 15. They're big enough to hurt someone if they wanted to. So they do create an air of threat, which I think they really enjoy. And they always roll the bins down the hill in the park. So in the morning, there's rubbish everywhere, and you know they've been out.
Oh my God.
So they were out last night, and typically I was out with my dog, and typically we just really shy away from them. And it was interesting because my dog normally is very friendly. But with these young kids, and he loves kids usually, these young kids, he was wary. There was something about his wariness that brought out in them, most of them, a couple of them I think were afraid of dogs, but the rest of them, it brought out in them a real softness.
Oh,
Got down on their knees, and they're like trying to call to Elliot, my dog. And Elliot was getting close and then coming back to me and getting close and coming back to me. And I thought, I thought that was the beginning of an interaction with them that could be followed up on. I could now see them with Elliot and say hello. I could, in the next step, sort of chat with them a little bit. And eventually I could get to the place where we can have the kind of dialogue that you and I are valuing. But it's like something had to happen first. And
yes, yeah.
was the change that happened in them because of Elliot's wariness. And that was the key, that something softened immediately between me and them because of his response.
Yes, yes. That's a beautiful example.
In my example, what it felt like happened was that the vulnerability of Elliot's vulnerability, my dog, allowed them and me to see each other as human. It's like us humans together are trying to let this dog know it's okay, it's safe. Somehow we became human to each other. We for that moment we were on the same side suddenly.
Yes.
And it was that I think brings an opening to something more. Yeah.
Okay. So this was very fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we opened a lot of little doors that we could go through and find more.